Question A. We have discussed and we find that saṅkhārā actually has two meanings. The first meaning refers to the fourth aggregate, which is volitional activity. And the second meaning for saṅkhārā is the phenomena which is constructed by cause and condition. And that condition also will create future saṅkhārā, which has future causes and conditions. So that's the two meanings that we've got. Shall I go on to B? B. So the bigger circle is sabbe dhamma, all things. The smaller circle here is sabbe saṅkhārā, which is only the conditional things. So all things is conditional and unconditional, and saṅkhārā is only the conditioned things. So to answer the first part, which is, why do you think it's never stated anywhere, all things are impermanent and all things are suffering? Can I answer why it is never stated that all things are suffering? Okay, all things are suffering because
Are all things suffering?
Not all things are suffering. Only saṅkhārā is suffering.
Why?
Because they are. How do I word this? Okay, I'm quite near. Just have to. Saṅkhārā are conditioned things. So there are some things which are unconditioned, and for example, saṅkhārā is something related to our own construction. So if we didn't construct it, for example, I didn't construct the earth, the clouds and the earth and the stones, those things don't suffer, but the things that I create suffer. Will cause me to suffer. The other one is all things are impermanent. We find that there are some things that are not impermanent. For example, the law of nature, like gravity, would be not impermanent. Karma is deathless and non-impermanent, and possibly nibbana is also not impermanent, and therefore
Possibly only.
I'm not too confident with it. My group members suggested it. I personally have not experienced whether they are not impermanent or not, so I don't have the confidence to say so, sir. But yes, because not all things have causes and conditions, they would give rise to where's my I don't know what I'm saying anymore already.
The suffering, is it?
It's okay. I just need to practice thinking like this. So yes, not all things have causes and conditions, and therefore we cannot say that they lead to suffering and impermanence. So we need only to say that things which are impermanent and suffering are the saṅkhārā, but all things are non-self.
Even things that are not caused by causes and conditions are also not self.
I have not actually gotten to list down all the things which are unconditioned, but I think so. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you.
The saṅkhārā that we are talking about is one of the 5 aggregates. There's evolution activities. One is the aggregates, one of the aggregates.
The other
one is the process.
Process?
All things that is under the construction is a saṅkhārā. So it's not limited to the 5 aggregates.
Oh, okay. All right. So it's basically the same as what Daniel said, lah.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay.
The second one is
Except Nibbana, what is that?
Nirvana is permanent. when you reach the stage of Nibbana, you shouldn't be suffering. It shouldn't be impermanent, it should be permanent. So it cannot be included.
Only Nibbana?
Yeah.
Only
the
Nibbana?
other, another one. Well, the law of cause and effect. There is karma.
Okay.
And then the next one will be weather.
Weather changes, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Well, I never asked them properly. We say weather, I've forgotten. Well, this one I'm not very sure now.
Okay.
Then the next one is seed. The seed. It means seed that is planted will grow exactly. Whatever is planted, that type of tree will grow. That means, for example, a durian seed will grow a durian tree.
Okay.
Next one is the Dhamma. Dhamma is the teaching of Buddha. No, there was one time I read about the teaching of Buddha. A person was asking Buddha, today you teach this one. What about the past Buddha? What do they teach? Buddha said, everything the same. This Buddha teach, and the last Buddha, and the coming Buddha will be the same. So, this is also permanent. Now, the next one is Citta, consciousness. I don't know, because they say is mind is always there. So, I'm not too sure.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, discussion 13A. The saṅkhārā anicca refer to the saṅkhārā in the five aggregates. Volitional activities that mean internal mental phenomena. So the second one's sabbe saṅkhārā anicca refer to all conditional phenomena, that is internal and external phenomena. B, 13B, is because Dhamma includes Nibbana, which is unconditioned and permanent but not self. This is the three main characteristic for Nibbana.
And also not suffering.
Yeah, one more.
You sure that Dhamma here refers only to Nibbana and nothing else? Okay, what other things does it include? Besides saṅkhārā and Nibbana, what other things does Dhamma include? Forgot to put that in the question.
We say it's a four niyama. A karma niyama is also included in the Dhamma. So it's not conditional.
Isn't karma conditional?
Karma niyama.
Oh, the niyama.
Not
The niyama.
Karma niyama.
Okay.
So karma niyama is
but explain to them what is niyama. They don't understand Pali.
rules.
Huh?
No, how can I say?
You can say it's
Principles
order,
of karma.
it's certainty.
Order or a law of karma.
Okay,
Yes.
law will be a
Law
better
of
word.
karma.
Yeah. And then?
Yes.
What else?
And then law of bija.
Bija is what?
Bija is the seed. So when you plant apple seed, only apple tree comes up. Other tree cannot come up. It's a bija niyama. And then it's udu niyama. When you touch the fire, only hot you can feel. Yes, this is udu niyama. And third is dhamma niyama. I think dhamma niyama something is
What is dhamma
common
niyama?
by the commentary. So
No, all these are from the commentary. The four niyamas of are from the
no,
commentary.
I mean
Yes.
dhamma niyama.
Yeah.
It's mean I have read when Buddha was born, there's four cool pot appear on the or the dhamma niyama. I think it's in the commentary. Yes.
And then when he after he's born, he walks 7 steps and lotus pop up.
Yes. In the commentary, it's a dhamma niyama. So how can I explain the dhamma niyama?
Okay.
I think dependent origination is also the dhamma niyama, is it?
What do you think?
I think so.
Okay.
Okay. dependent origination is also a Dhamma niyama. When the object touch your eye contact will appear. It's a Dhamma niyama. Okay. This four niyama is also included in Dhamma. So it's no suffering, no dukkha, and also not self.
It sounds to me that these four niyama, they are also saṅkhārā activity. Isn't it? They are saṅkhārā. But just now you said what is beyond saṅkhārā? The weather, even the seed, if you want to plant a seed, not necessarily you will get an apple. Of course, you apple seed get an apple, but it depends on other condition. The weathers.
Now that's utu niyama.
But this is a condition.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, good point. So like Asma Kumara asked, he's talking about the utu or he's talking about the niyama. They are two different things. The laws of nature are the laws of nature. They don't change. But it's how we formulate them that can change. For example, when Isaac Newton was sitting under the apple tree, apple dropped on his head and somehow he formulated the law of gravity. But Einstein also has his own formula for the law of gravity. So the law of gravity is a natural law and it doesn't change. But it depends on how you look at it and how you formulate it, from which angle. This will change.
5 niyama or 4 niyamas? I seem to have an impression it's 5, isn't it? Chitta.
Oh, chitta niyama.
Okay.
The
So,
ways
but-
of the mind. Yeah. The laws of the mind, how the mind works.
So, but you don't have this 5 classification in the suttas, but there is in the sutta I found Dhamma niyamata. This is found in the sutta where the Buddha talked about whether or not, I'm not too sure whether it was the Buddha who said it, but it says that whether or not there's a Buddha to explain, to reveal that it's anicca, dukkha, anatta, these are true anyway. So that one is referred to Dhamma niyamata, which Venerable Thanissaro translated it as orderliness of the Dhamma.
Anyway, there's another word that very frequently also is called dhammata. Dhammata. That is just Dhamma. This is nature. That's the way it is, nature. Dhammata, Dhamma niyamata. Dhamma niyamata is not so often, but Dhammata is very often, especially when it comes to explaining all those miraculous things that happen to the Buddha or the Bodhisattva. Okay, so the first part of the question is already answered correctly. Yeah, the first saṅkhārā refers to the fourth aggregate, and then the second saṅkhārā refers to a larger collection of things, whatever things that come into existence because of causes and conditions, what we call constructions. And there are actually two aspects of constructions. One is the active aspect and the other one is the passive aspect. The active aspect is the fourth aggregate where volition is involved. It's something volitional. I'll give you one very good example among the 4 aggregates. Sati and sanya. Sanya is perception and sati is mindfulness. I mean, that's our popular translation, sanya and sati, right? Now, both of these are related to memory. But sanya, I understand sanya as spontaneous memory and mindfulness as willful memory. To give you an example, if you see something and immediately you recognize it, right? That is spontaneous memory. If you see somebody and then you cannot remember where you saw this person before, and then you try and remember, then you manage to remember where you saw him. That is willful memory. Or you suddenly dig into your pockets and then you cannot find your key. And then you ask yourself, where did I put my key? And then you start to try to look back, recall what was the last thing you did, when was the last time you held the key, and so forth. That is willful memory. Willful. Volitional. Yeah, one is volitional, the other one is non-volitional. Okay? So these are very good examples of passive and active aspects of saṅkhārā. Sanya is a passive saṅkhārā. It is spontaneous memory. Whereas sati is active saṅkhārā. It is willful or volitional memory. Another good example is when you all do chanting. I'm sure many of you do chanting, right? You have the chanting book. You go and do chanting every evening, every morning, and you've been doing that for years and years. But if you close the chanting book, can you chant or not? No, many of you cannot. Yeah, but you've been looking at the same words every evening, every morning for years. But because you did not make a willful effort to memorize it, you don't remember it. Yeah? So that is the active aspect of saṅkhārā, volitional. So the active aspect of saṅkhārā is only a very small part of the big saṅkhārā, which covers everything, active as well as passive. Now, for example, this building, this hall is a saṅkhārā. It's a construction, but it does not have any will, any volition in it. It was constructed many years ago. Yeah? But because it is here, it is a cause and condition for us to be able to hold the workshop here. This is not an active construction, it is a passive one. All right, so the first construction is referring to the active construction, the fourth aggregate, which involves volition. And the second construction refers to all constructions, whether they are passive or active, as long as they come into being because of causes and conditions. Yeah, and they also become the cause and condition for other saṅkhārās. So now, the reason why we come to this section and ask the question, what is saṅkhārā, as I mentioned earlier, is because in our root sutta, Tatiya Samadhi Sutta, on page 54, the Buddha defined vipassana as a three-step process of how to view, investigate, and distinctly see saṅkhārā. But he did not define what is saṅkhārā. Yeah? And he did not define also how to see or how to investigate. Right? So that's why I say we have to do some detective work, looking around other suttas to find out what is saṅkhārā. And very surprisingly, saṅkhārā is not defined explicitly in any sutta. That's why in this compilation, there are just a few suttas that talk about saṅkhārā. So if you look at the section on page 118, you see there's only Dhammapada, 3 verses, and then there's one part in Majjhima Nikaya 35, Chula Saccaka Sutta, and 3 suttas from the Samyutta Nikaya, another sutta from the Samyutta Nikaya about Channa. And that's about all we have, about saṅkhārā. And from here, we have to make our inference. What is saṅkhārā? How can we define saṅkhārā? How do we know that this saṅkhārā is the saṅkhārā that the Buddha referred to in the practice of vipassana? So now to look at page 118, the Dhammapada verses. This is very popular because usually in most meditation centers, especially vipassana meditation centers, they will chant this. So all constructions are impermanent. And one sees this with wisdom. One wearies of the suffering of the aggregates. This is the path to purification. All constructions are suffering. All things are not self. When one sees thus with wisdom, one wearies of the suffering of the aggregates. This is the path to purification. Okay, so this shows that this is a path to purification. And you will see also that vipassana is involved in the path to purification in a later sutta under the functions of samatha and vipassana on page 128. On page 128, you can see a share in gnosis. Gnosis means intuitive spiritual wisdom, or rather spiritual wisdom. It says there are 2 things which have a share in gnosis, samatha and vipassana. Here it says tranquility and distinct seeing. When tranquility is developed, what purpose does it serve? The mind is developed. When the mind is developed, what purpose does it serve? Passion is abandoned. Right or not? Okay, then goes on to vipassana. When vipassana is developed, what purpose does it serve? wisdom is developed. When wisdom is developed, what purpose does it serve? Ignorance is abandoned. Defiled by passions, monks, the mind is not liberated. Defiled by ignorance, wisdom is not developed. Thus, monks, from the fading of passion, there is liberation of the mind. From the fading of ignorance, liberation by wisdom or liberation of wisdom. Okay, from here we can infer and deduce that samatha will lead to liberation of mind in terms of liberating the mind from passion. All right? And then vipassana will lead to development of wisdom. Right? And when wisdom is developed, what happens? Ignorance is abandoned. So we could also say that here, although it's translated as liberation by wisdom, we can also translate it as liberation of wisdom. Why? In the same way that there's liberation of mind, meaning the mind is liberated from the defilements, from passion, so we can say that vipassana liberates wisdom from ignorance. It is because of ignorance that wisdom cannot shine. And because when vipassana is developed, wisdom is developed. When wisdom is developed, ignorance is abandoned. Right? So we also say that there is liberation of wisdom, liberating wisdom from the cloud of ignorance. So we see that when there is wisdom, then there is purification of the mind. So here, that's why we go back to 118, the verses in Dhammapada. This is the path to purification. What is the path to purification? It's by seeing with wisdom all saṅkhāras as impermanent, suffering, and all things as not self. So from here we make this logical deduction. Oh, therefore, this construction is what the Buddha is probably referring to in his definition of vipassana. All right? So here also we can see how saṅkhāras are to be viewed. They are to be viewed as impermanent, suffering, and not self. On page 116, what is saṅkhārā? There are only two suttas. Okay, just two suttas on what is saṅkhārā. From the Samyutta Nikaya 6.15, and actually it is also repeated in the Digha Nikaya in Mahaparinibbana Sutta. This is what the Buddha said before he passed away. Just before he passed away, he addressed the monks. Now, monks, let me address you. Saṅkhārā have the nature of vanishing. With heedfulness be fulfilled. This is what usually some monks would say after you observe the 5 precepts. They will say, Appamadena sampadeta. Right? And you can see that on the left-hand column. Appamadena is with heedfulness. And sampadeta means be fulfilled. That means fulfill your training with heedfulness, without forgetting. Then he goes on to say, Anicca-vata saṅkhāra. Impermanent indeed are saṅkhāra. Upada-vaya dhammino. Their nature is that of arising and vanishing. Upajitva nirujjanti. Having arisen, they cease. Tesam upasamo sukho. Their appeasement is happiness. We can see that the characteristic of saṅkhāra is that they arise and pass away. Having arisen, they vanish. That is the characteristic of saṅkhāra. Right? Therefore, in the next pages, it says that saṅkhāras are to be viewed with wisdom as impermanent because they arise and pass away. And below that, chewable, Kajaniya Sutta, that is the definition of the 4th aggregate. And what monks do you call saṅkhāra? Because they construct the constructed, thus they are called constructions. This is the active form of saṅkhāra that I talked about earlier. Right? Okay? Now, coming back also to what just now our brother talked about the niyamas, the 5 types of niyamas. Why is it that all saṅkhāras are impermanent and suffering, but you cannot say that all dhammas are impermanent and suffering, but rather all dhammas are not self? Well, dhammas here include all constructed things as well as things that are not constructed, like nibbana. Now, nibbana is not constructed, therefore nibbana is not impermanent, it is permanent. And it is not suffering because it is happiness. All right? That is the state of nibbana. There are also other things like the law of nature. And there are various forms of the law of nature according to the 5 niyamas that he wrote on the sheet of paper just now. This one is according to the commentary. It's not in the suttas. But you could infer some of the things from the suttas. Okay, for example, he talks about, the first one is kamma niyama. Kamma niyama is a law of cause and effect, the moral law of cause and effect. When you do something motivated by greed, hatred, and delusion, that is unwholesome karma, it will give rise to unwholesome effect, sooner or later. If you do something motivated by non-greed, non-hatred, and non-delusion, that is wholesome karma, it will also lead to good results sooner or later. This is the moral law of cause and effect. This is not impermanent. It applies throughout samsara, anytime, anywhere. It is applicable. It's just a matter of when the results will ripen, that's all. And then the next one is utu niyama, what the commentary calls the laws of weather. But we now know that weather has changed a lot. But it has changed in terms of regularity. But the laws of the weather don't change. The laws are still there. It's just that because the causes and conditions change, that's why weather also changes. Because of the pole shift or because of certain planets or asteroids that are coming into the trajectory or orbit of the Earth, it affects the Earth's rotation and so forth. Because we are part of the cosmos, and anything that happens in the cosmos, it affects us in some way or other. Right? So the laws may not change, but things happen out of the ordinary. They don't happen like it used to happen. But it does not necessarily mean that the laws have changed. It's just that causes and conditions have changed. But the law is still the same. Same with the next one, bija niyama, the order of seeds. It's just that a durian seed can only produce a durian plant or durian tree. It cannot produce a papaya tree. That law applies all the time. And then the next one is the dhamma niyama. Dhamma niyama refers to the law of cause and effect, the non-moral law of cause and effect. For example, if someone becomes an arahant, then this person is no longer subject to influence by the defilements. So this is the law. This law can never change. Once a person has become an arahant, he will not backslide to become a sotapan or a worldling. So this is the law. And then the law of impermanence, that all saṅkhāras are impermanent, are suffering, and are not self, is also a law. It's a law of nature. It also doesn't change. The expressions of this law may change. People's understanding of this law may change, but this law will go on forever. So that's why the Buddha's teachings will deteriorate eventually and disappear from this earth, because with the passage of time, people misunderstand the teachings, or they misrepresent the teachings, or for other reasons, they distort the teachings. And finally, it becomes so adulterated that it cannot be followed anymore. But the law is still there. The law of anicca, dukkha, anatta is still there. The Four Noble Truths is still there. It's just that people's understanding of it have become corrupted, and it cannot be followed anymore, eventually. Actually, the Buddha's teachings are all the Buddha's expression of the laws of nature. Because he discovered the laws of nature and then he formulated it for us, and he has passed down to us to more than 2,500 years or so. All right? But then again, now we also have a problem because there are different versions of the Buddha's teachings. We have the Pali version, we have the Sanskrit, the Chinese, the Tibetan, and so forth. And everyone claims that theirs is the correct version. So how do you know which one is correct? So there is some sort of corruption because you can see that sometimes the so-called parallels differ. As we saw earlier on in the two suttas, in Majjhima Nikaya 19 and 20, there are many other cases like that here and there. So this shows the impurity of the teachings that has been transmitted, although the law may still hold. The understanding and formulation of the teachings could have changed. Right? And finally, the last one is the Citta Niyama. Citta Niyama is the order of the mind. Okay. The order of the mind means it's also a natural law. It's a law concerning the mind, the characteristics of the mind. The characteristics of the mind is that it is immaterial. It's not tangible. It's not something that you can perceive with your five senses. And it has the nature of consciousness, of being able to know an object. Now that is the intrinsic nature of the mind. That's what mind is. Mind is something that has the ability to know an object. Whereas rupa or form, or the four great elements, cannot know. For example, this table doesn't have sentience. Yeah, it doesn't have the ability to know anything. But because our hand is part of five aggregates, when we touch it, there's a body consciousness that's able to feel its hardness, recognize it. So this feeling, recognizing this awareness, this consciousness comes from the citta, the mind. Okay? So these are the things that don't change. That's why these things cannot be said to be impermanent and suffering. These things are permanent and they are not suffering per se, but they are all anatta. There's no one who made these laws. You're there because you're there. That's the way it is. That's part of nature. No one created nature. No one created these laws. So that's why it's anatta. Same for Nibbana. Nibbana is a state, but no one created this state. It was there all the time. It's just a matter of getting the password to get in there. And also, suffering is only something that is subjective. It's subjective, it's not objective. You say that all saṅkhāras are suffering. Is this table a saṅkhāra? It's anicca, but it's not suffering. It doesn't suffer.
Suffering in the sense, unsatisfactoriness.
Well, I mean, it doesn't feel unsatisfactory. It's only you, the subject, looks at it and says it's unsatisfactory because it changes. Okay, looking at all these things, we shall make some inferences regarding saṅkhāra as a vipassana object. Looking at all these excerpts from the suttas that I've compiled, which is a result of detective work, trying to find out what the Buddha meant by saṅkhāra as an object of vipassana, and trying to find out also how to view and investigate these saṅkhāras. The first inference that we can draw is that there is no hard and fast line drawn between concept and ultimate reality. Why do I bring this up? How many of you have heard of ultimate reality or paramattha dhamma? This idea of ultimate reality is something that was introduced by the early Buddhists, what we call the Abhidhammikas. The Abhidhammikas are the people who are supposed to be experts in the Abhidhamma, the third Pitaka, and they analyze the Buddha's teachings in terms of the principles of Abhidhamma. Now, according to the Abhidhamma, which is also used by the Visuddhimagga in its explanation of the suttas and how to practice the path to purification, it is said that there are two realities. One is called conventional reality, and the other one is called ultimate reality. Conventional reality are concepts. Ultimate reality are things that can be experienced directly through your six senses without going through any process of rational thinking. To be precise, they define ultimate reality as only four things. One is rupa, or form, matter. Second is citta, the mind. Third is cetasika, mental factors. Earlier on I talked about different departments of the mind. These different departments of the mind which have different functions, they are called cetasika or mental factors in Abhidhamma. And the fourth one is Nibbana. Nibbana can be directly perceived and experienced by the mind without going through any rational thinking. So all these four realities are called ultimate realities. Okay? Now, according to this Abhidhamma, when one does vipassana, one can only view and investigate ultimate realities, except nibbana. That means for vipassana meditation, we must only look at or observe or view, investigate form or matter, or citta and cetasika. That's all. Right? Citta is the mind. Cetasika is the mental factors, like for example, mindfulness, effort, samadhi, thought, examination, vitaka, vichara, rapture, all these mental states. Concepts are other things, other than these things, which needs to rational thinking. For example, the chair that you're sitting on is a concept. When you close your eyes and you feel the chair, there's no chair anymore. You just feel certain sensations in your body, right? Not? Yeah. Open your eyes, you see a shape that you call a chair. It's something that you construct with your mind. If I show you an object which you have never seen before, a fruit that you've never seen before, you wouldn't know what it's called. You wouldn't know how it tastes like. But if it's a fruit that you have seen and tasted before, I look at it, immediately you have an idea in your mind. Okay, this is the name of the fruit. That's how it tasted like, right? That's how it would taste like, with slight variations. So because this is not something that you can directly experience, it's only through past memory that you are able to know what it is. It is not a vipassana object. However, the word saṅkhārā is not defined to mean just only rupa, citta, and cetasika. Rupa is form, citta is mind, and cetasika is mental factors. In fact, we can see from the compilation or extracts that saṅkhārā has the characteristic of arising and passing away. And it arises and passes away due to cause and condition. Okay? So that is all. It doesn't matter whether it's a concept or whether it's an ultimate reality. Saṅkhārā is anything that can arise and pass away due to causes and conditions. Full stop. That also includes all your thoughts. Yeah, your thoughts also arise and pass away. Correct or not? Your ideas, your opinions, your perceptions, your assumptions, your expectations, they also arise and pass away. Although they are built on concepts. Your ideas, expectations, perceptions, hopes, aspirations, theories, hypotheses, speculations, conjectures, all these are all based on concepts. But they arise and pass away due to cause and conditions. The way you behave, the way you conduct yourself is also a result of past conditioning from childhood onwards until now. So these are also saṅkhārās. These also arise and pass away. And therefore, these are the objects of vipassana. These can also be viewed in terms of anicca, dukkha, anatta. So, coming back to what I just said, for vipassana contemplation, saṅkhārā are not restricted to form, citta, and cetasika, but include anything that has been constructed by causes and conditions and has the nature of arising and vanishing. Now, looking at Dhamma, non-saṅkhārā included in Dhamma do not have the above two characteristics. But nevertheless, they are not self. For example, all the laws of nature, they are there not because of causes and conditions, although they describe how causes and conditions relate to one another, but they are not caused by causes and conditions. For example, the law of gravity. The law of gravity is there all the time. Or the law of physics, even more apparent. The law of physics is there all the time. It's just that scientists started to discover the law of physics hundreds of years ago. They knew only a little bit about it, and they formulated certain laws of physics. A classic example is the atomic theory, Newtonian physics. The atomic theory starts off with the postulation that the smallest particle or matter is the atom. And then from there, they formulated certain laws. It's called Newtonian physics, which is very applicable to massive bodies. That's why even based on Newtonian physics, one could make very precise calculations and even send man to the moon, and send spacecraft to other planets and other constellations, other solar systems. Then later on, they found out more about this law of physics. They found out that matter does not always behave as particles. Sometimes they behave as waves. All right? And when you regard them as waves, you cannot regard them as particles at the same time. Sometimes you're not certain whether they behave like waves or like particles. After they discovered that, and then they discovered that matter behaves not like particles all the time, sometimes like waves, then they came up with another theory. It's called the wave theory. At first it's the particle theory. Then it came up with the wave theory. And then they came up with the principle of uncertainty. You cannot be certain which one happens, and you cannot use one to calculate the other. Then with the passage of time, they found out that, hey, the smallest particle of matter is not the atom, because within the atom, there's the neutron and the proton, there's the electrons, and within them, there's more subatomic particles, even smaller. So when their equipment becomes more sophisticated, they see deeper and they understand the laws of nature deeper. Then they reformulated it and came out with the quantum physics, the quantum theory. And in quantum theory, now they're very careful. They don't talk about certainties anymore. Now it's all about probabilities and possibilities. No more certainties. And this quantum theory applies to minute bodies. Although the Newtonian physics apply to large bodies, massive bodies. But when it comes to subatomic particles, these laws don't hold anymore. Then they have to apply quantum theory to these laws. And they have to calculate possibilities and probabilities instead of certainties. So this is how the human perception and formulation of the laws of nature change according to our increased or deeper understanding of them. But the laws of nature are there all the time. The laws of quantum mechanics are there right from the beginning, but they just discovered it recently. Yeah. So it's the same. The laws of nature regarding liberation from samsara is there all the time. It's just that the Buddha discovered it, and then he formulated his understanding of these laws to us, and then we try to understand and preserve those teachings and pass it down from generation to generation, and then due to adulteration, eventually these laws become so adulterated that they cannot be understood and followed anymore. Then that's where the Jasana disappears, and it goes into darkness for many aeons, and one fine day, another Buddha will arise and rediscover these laws. Yeah, so this is how it goes. Anyway, coming back to saṅkhārā as vipassana object, this is very important. So, as a vipassana object, saṅkhāras refer to anything that has the nature of arising and passing away. It refers to anything that arises and passes away due to causes and conditions. So it is not restricted to just citta and cittasika, not just restricted to form, rupa. Okay. Why do I want to stress this point? Because modern day vipassana methods and teachers have been stressing that vipassana object is only rupa, citta and cittasika. You only observe the citta and cittasika. You don't observe your thoughts, your ideas, your assumptions, your expectations, the contents of your thoughts. This is not saṅkhārā. These are concepts. You cannot observe them. So when you're watching, for example, the rising and falling, you just watch the rising and falling because you can experience it in terms of movement or tension and so forth, and this is ultimate reality. So you observe that only. You observe how your thoughts arise and pass away. And thoughts arise, you just note them as thinking, planning. When you see something, you notice as seeing, hearing, and all this. Actually, these are also concepts. Yeah? But you're using concepts as labels to direct your attention to these things that are happening. Now, when it comes to thoughts, Usually what we do is, in this modern Vipassana movement, is to just note these thoughts, don't pursue them, let them go, and then come back to your rising and falling. Or if you're doing walking meditation, come back to your movements of your legs. Or come back to whatever you're doing in your daily life, to be aware of the physical movements, physical sensations. So it's like giving priority to matter, material phenomena that you can experience through your five senses. So what happens to our hang-ups, our idiosyncrasies? What happens to our psychological and emotional baggage? When it comes to meditation, we just sweep them under the carpet. Thinking, feeling depressed, feeling sad, feeling angry, put them under the carpet, come back to rising and falling. Anything happens to you, you just note it, sweep it under the carpet, come back to your lifting, pushing, bracing. Coming back to your in-breath, out-breath. Get back to your nimitta, forget all those things. They are all disturbing, distracting my attention. I want to go into that very aesthetic and peaceful space, a rest for my mind. Yeah, you're getting a rest, but it's only temporary. When you get up from there, you had a nice, beautiful session, you get up, all your psychological hang-ups come back to you. You haven't solved it, you're just sweeping them under the carpet. That's why, many years ago, this Jack Cornfield, you've heard of him, a very famous Western American Vipassana teacher. He posed this question. He says, how is it that Western Vipassana teachers who are supposed to be masters of their mind still have to seek psychotherapeutic help from psychotherapists? This is a paraphrase of what he said. He didn't say in exactly those words. This also somebody brought it to me and asked me, why is it like that? At that time it occurred to me, very obviously, it's because these modern Vipassana teachers are trained under the tradition of the Abhidhammikas. Whatever psychological, emotional hang-ups they have during meditation, intensive meditation practice, you just sweep them under the carpet. Just thinking, feeling sad, unhappy, angry, throw away, come back, rising, falling, sitting, touching. And you don't address those issues at all. We had a nice, beautiful 5-week intensive retreat. You can see things arising and passing away. Your rising and falling also is in steps. You walk so you can see things going on there. You can see impermanence all over the place. But you don't understand why you are having all these hang-ups. And you come out, you still haven't resolved your problems with your spouse, with your girlfriend, with your relationships with people, with your attitudes, with your habitual reactions, inexplicable reactions to things in the world. Yeah? And worse, people have this spiritual materialism, which means to say, I can sit for 5 hours, I can conquer pain, If pain come out, I would struggle like man until I bang it, pew, disappeared, exploded and disappeared, and such a nice feeling. So is that atta or anatta? I conquered pain. So I'm stressing this because I say that it is important to watch how your thoughts, your emotions, your psychological hang-ups, your emotional problems arise and pass away. They also arise and pass away due to causes and conditions. They are also saṅkhāras. They also need to be observed in terms of anicca, dukkha, and even more important, anatta. These thoughts, these emotions, these hang-ups are not me, not mine, not myself. They are the products of causes and conditions. Understanding those causes and conditions doesn't take you away from the truth. It helps you to solve your life problems. What can the five senses do to you? The five senses are just raw data coming into your field of awareness. What is more important is how you interpret your experience. And so that's why it is important to have this understanding. This view of how to view saṅkhāra is very important. It is to view all saṅkhāras in terms of anicca, dukkha, and anatta. Anatta in terms of conditionality. We only understand anatta because everything that happens is due to cause and conditioning, not because I'm in control. But due to causes and conditions, many of which we cannot control. We can deduce from the few extracts that I've compiled how to view vipassana objects, right? Now, how do you investigate? This is also not shown in the suttas. You see it with right wisdom. How? How to see it with right wisdom? How do you investigate? You see, it's not found in the suttas. So that's why this one you need to get the help of people who have done it, and competent teachers or competent yogis who have done it before, and then they can share with you how to do it, how to apply this right view into practice, so that you will end up seeing distinctly these saṅkhāras. And you see distinctly all these saṅkhāras are due to cause and conditioning. Seeing distinctly here is, for me, an intuitive understanding that is a result of step 1 and step 2. Step 1 is getting the theoretical knowledge, how to view saṅkhāras. Okay, this one you have to get it by reading, by listening to Dhamma talk, to discussion. Then the second step of investigating is actually looking back at yourself. This is where kaya-sati is important. Kaya-gata-sati or kaya-sati, introspective awareness, looking back at the subjective experiencer, how the mind reacts or relates to what is happening at the senses. So this involves looking back. Only when you look back can you see how the mind is reacting, right or not? The reaction happens first, and then if you are following right behind, you can pinpoint it and look at its cause. If you are not sharp enough, you don't look back at it, then you're already lost into it, and then you cannot see. You cannot see the cause and conditioning anymore because you're already part of it. So that's why kaya-sati or kaya-gata-sati is so important. It's always on your toes, trying to see how the mind is reacting to what's happening, to the 6 senses. Not only the 5 senses, but especially the 6th sense. Your thoughts, impressions, ideas, expectations, hopes, frustrations, all these things that are happening in the mind. Okay, so I hope that you can understand this. This is a very important part of the workshop. We have been trying to deconstruct preconceived ideas and erroneous views about samatha, and now we are going on to vipassana to impress upon you that saṅkhārā is not limited to ultimate realities. It also covers all your thoughts, emotional and psychological hang-ups, and they are to be investigated with right view. These are not me, not mine, not myself. They arise because of causes and conditions.